Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I made this crop top with ruffles. This is a cute trendy style for summer. You also have the option to make it longer if you want to. And this style can work with either non-stretchy or stretchy fabric. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe and don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. For this tutorial, I used about 2.5 yards of fabric. The amount you need will depend on your size. I also used tracing paper and I used an old top that I made as my pattern piece. So you want to start by improvising the front shape of your top, and you can always make your neckline higher or lower depending on what you're looking for. But for me, I decided to go with the low neckline, and I'm going to trace all around it on my tracing paper. And the goal is just to trace it nicely into the shape that you want it to be for your two front pieces, which will be your left and your right. Carefully trace under the armhole as well. So take your time around that part because it could be tricky. Right now I'm just going over it with a marker so you guys can see what shape I came up with. If you are unhappy with your shape, you can always go back and fix it. You can make it, the way that you actually want it to be. And to make your life easier, you can always pin your fabric or your top down or use some weights to pin it down so it's just easier to trace because you don't want to make any mistakes. So at the end of this, you should have two front pieces. Now I'm going to use the front piece to make my back piece, and I'm going to be doing this on the pattern paper as well. So you can see how I placed it on the paper, and I placed it on the fold of the paper, and I made my neckline higher. But once again, it's up to you if you want it to be higher or lower. So you can, just use what you want. After that, just simply cut around your shape. Also, here's where you can make that decision to make the actual top shorter. And I did that later on because I changed my mind. So I actually made it shorter, and you'll see from when I cut out the fabric how I made it shorter. But you can apply that to the pattern piece itself too. I'll explain quickly how I managed to get my sleeve shape. I basically traced all around the armhole and the sleeve down, and I placed it on the fold of the paper, and I just cut all around. So this is how I end up getting this shape using my top. Also, you can decide whether or not to add seam allowance in your pattern piece or add it in the fabric when you're cutting out the pattern piece. So now I'm going to place my pattern pieces on the fabric, and I'm just going to cut all around them. So I'm starting with the back piece, and then I'm going to be doing the same to the front piece. Make sure to place it on the fold of the fabric because the back piece has to be one piece. So as I was doing it, here's when I decided to make it shorter because I just wanted it to be shorter. So you can apply this part to the pattern itself before you even reach to this step, but I did it last minute because I changed my mind. But yeah, so here's how I made this part shorter. I just folded it in, and you can reuse the pattern to make it long or short, but this is how I folded it in to make it shorter. In the next part, I'll show you how I applied that to the back piece as well, which is very simple. Just placing it over and just cutting below so it evens out. Once again, you can use some weights or books just to weigh things down so things don't shift, but I was just rushing for the sake of time. Here I'm going to cut directly around my sleeve piece. Make sure you also place it on the fold of the fabric and cut two separate pieces as well. Now for the ruffles, you can decide how long and the width of your ruffles. So for me, I decided to make it 55 inches length, and I cut two separate pieces for 55 inches. And the width is about 6 inches. So when I hem it, it's going to be about maybe 4.5. But you can decide if you want it to be really short or really long. But this is the length and the inches that I decided to go with. Once I cut those two separate pieces, I plan to stitch them together so it's one long piece. So it'll be like 110 inches. So I've done that, and I've also serged the end. So I'd advise that you do that first, serge it, and then also fold it in and stitch it. That way when you start easing it for the ruffles, it doesn't affect it. When it comes to the actual ruffles, I straight stitched the top twice, And there's many videos on YouTube that will show you how to do this even slower, but I straight stitched the top, and then I did not backtrack or overlock it, so that way you're allowed to, it will give you room to ease it, just to, you know, make the ruffles. So I'll show you. Basically, I just pulled and tugged lightly the thread so it doesn't tear, but I tugged it and I eased my way all the way around, which will take time. So you really have to have patience during this time because you don't want to break the thread and start all over again. I think the right word is gathering. So you would gathering the fabric as you're tugging the thread. So that's what I did here. And you can also always loosen it if you want the ruffles to be a little bit looser, or tighten it, because you want to make sure it matches up with the bottom of your top, which I'll show you later on. Here I'm cutting the 2 strips for the front, which I'm gonna tie as a bow. So just simply cut 2 strips. You know, you can make it long, you can make it short, but this is how I created my strips. And I use a loop turner to flip it inside out. You also have to take your time here because sometimes the hook doesn't catch, but just take your time so that way you don't have to work too much. All I did was cut 2 strips about 2 inches or 1.5 inches wide and just fold it and stitch the raw edges and then flipped it inside out. That's it. So here's how I plan to put my front and back pieces together. So stitching the side and the top seams. Also, I already hemmed the neckline, and I plan to fold it in and straight stitch again just to make it better. I already stitched together the right side, so I'll show you how I added the left. Basically, you would stitch right side to right side of both the front and back pieces together. Once again, serge your necklines and fold it in and stitch it again just to make it look neater. You could also iron it down. When it comes to stitching your sleeve, you would fold it in half and stitch the raw side together and then flip it inside out. So I've stitched the raw side together and I've flipped it inside out, and I'll show you how I plan to attach it to my front and back piece of my top. You would flip your shirt inside out and keep your sleeve on the right side, and then you would insert the sleeve in the top, and then you just stitch around the armhole. So I finished stitching around my armhole, and this is how it would look. Now both sleeves are attached, and also I finished hemming the neckline. You can also iron it down, as I mentioned before, just to make sure everything stays flat or lays flat. Here's how I plan to add the ruffles. So before that, make sure the length of the ruffles matches the length of the top, the bottom. So if it doesn't match, you can always make the ruffles tighter by gathering it tighter or loosening up the gathering. So here's how I plan to stitch it. Also, you can use pins, so pin it so it'll be easier for you to take it back to the sewing machine. When applying the ruffles, make sure it's right side to right side with the top. So that way when you flip it, it's a neat attachment. So as you can see, I've added my ruffles. So that's how I applied mine to the top. Now I'll quickly show you how I added my the 2 strips. So all you're doing is just a straight stitch. So you just add it to the front and you just straight stitch down, and that's it. It's not really that hard for this part. And that's it. Everything's all stitched together. As you can see, my 2 front strips that I'll use to tie the front, the sleeves, the ruffles, all of it is all attached together. So thank you guys for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it useful and valuable. Don't forget to thumbs up the video and hit the notification bell so you don't miss another upload. Thank you guys for watching, and see you at the next tutorial. Bye!